for India to do in 7 years to double our capacity. As you would have heard what the finance minister of India has stated, that he wants a target of 300 million in 2025, in 10 years from now. I do believe it's a very ambitious target. It's not something which cannot be done. But we have to be practical and be able to state what are the issues which come up in steel industry expansion in India. If you look at, we have been promising a lot of capacity additions in India. Our current, we should have been this year at about 125. If you look at what was the projections which was made only about 3 years back. Today we are about 108, 110 capacity. And I have kept this deliberately, the next slide, to show you how our Indian producers are adding to the capacity. I've taken 3. There's no prize for guessing who is A, B and C. But you can see A, which is one of the most established company in India, has been practically stagnant from 07 to 015. Company B has been a private entrepreneur who has really built, and I was very happy to see him getting an award for it today, that he has been the most prolific in the capacity additions. And then of course you have the old established, what I would call the leader of the pack in terms of innovation, culture, whose has been a steady growth but growing. Now, as you would have heard Sajan Jindal, he said he wants to remain still the number 3 behind the 2 additional players I have mentioned here. But we must understand that if India has to move forward with this capacity addition, it will have to follow the path of the private entrepreneurs in terms of the growth. Even today, it is surprising that in India we are not utilizing our full capacity. Our capacity in FY15, it's about 110, and our utilized production has been in the range of about 85, 86. So it's not a fact that we do not have the capacity to meet our demand, but we are still underutilizing our capacity. You always hear about the Indian steel industry being one of the most stressed industry. It is a fact that the Indian steel industry is stressed, and when you start looking at it, from a more analytical manner, you would find that the stressed assets are in the power sector, in the realty sector, in the steel sector. And the tendency is to look at all this with the same paintbrush. It is certainly not so, because when you look at the power sector, it is suffering from lack of material. It is suffering from lack of delay in getting infrastructure, and it is becoming a stressed asset. But it has nothing to do with competition. A power sector decides what will be the power factor. In India, we are suffering from a deficit of power, and till today there is no competition between power sectors. So the pricing is not depending on what is an import price. If you look at the realty sector, the real estate sector, it is also the same. A flat in Bombay costs 4 times that what it is in Calcutta. It is arising from a supply and demand situation. It has got nothing to do with international competition. But in steel, when you start looking at it, it is, you have to, in the steel sector, look at the disadvantages in terms of delays in infrastructure, delays in getting the land, high costs, capital costs, and at the same time you have to work with international competition. And that international competition, as has come out, is never, you can't say it is always fair. It has got a lot of what you would call nuances to look after. So, I am a firm believer that the way all the stressed assets are put into one pot and solutions being thought of as in one pot would not be the solution for the steel industry. Steel industry has to be given a unique look. Now, the question comes up, how is it that you give it a unique look? When you had this 2008 crisis, how did America look at the automotive sector? They looked at it as from a unique and found a different solution. GM would have been not there today if it was not for the government of USA coming in and finding a solution. Same was with Chrysler. So, in the 2008 crisis which took place, the majority government, even a government of USA which is supposed to be only private, looked at it as a national problem and found a solution. What did the UK government do with its banking sector in 2008? They found a unique solution. A government of UK looking at a private bank and looking for a solution and putting in a lot of funds in order to save such things. These are things which are also necessary for us in India, for the steel sector specifically. The stressed assets have to be looked at differently from other stressed assets. Many times I've told that it is consolidation which is a requirement, and with this consolidation it will make consolidation in India. It is a very consolidated steel industry. It is, I beg to differ with what the Joint Secretary was saying, that it is a very fragmented. Do you know, in the flag section in India, the first three players are practically 50%. Now, how you can't have more than that in Europe? They say the first three. If it is more than 50%, then the Anti-Monopoly Act comes in. So, a lot of these nuances come up. Consolidation is a requirement. I don't think in India consolidation is the requirement which would enable the steel sector to come out of its crisis. The challenges, it's a unique situation for the steel industry in India. You have the scarcity, you don't have coking coal here, everything is imported. The raw material price volatility. Now in this, as was mentioned also by the Joint Secretary, is India going to make what I'd say an economic model out of iron ore mining, or it is going to make an economic model from adding value to that iron ore? What is the necessity of iron ore being priced at that level as international prices when it has an adverse effect on the steel pricing? And to that extent, if the international steel industry was at the same level of what I would say disadvantages as the Indian steel industry, I would have understood. But it is not so. Here, what is the capital cost? Capital cost is at least 4 to 5 times that of what say is in USA or in Europe. Is it the same with infrastructure? Infrastructure here, the steel plants have to build. It is not so in other places. Now, these are fundamental issues which we have to tackle, and it is very clear today that with the safeguard duty, which is valid for 200 days till you do the investigation, is that a solution? I don't see that as a solution. I look at solutions as We have to have a different approach to the steel industry, and it is not that there are no examples. Are you aware that in the EU countries, when they had the Iron and Steel, Coal and Steel Commission, how much money was spent by the government in Europe in order to restructure the industry? It was the public sector in those days, it was not yet. When they wanted to privatize the whole industry, they wanted to set up a restructuring. And that restructuring in those days, I'm saying this was maybe in the late 80s, about $30 billion was spent. Now, these are facts which we also have to take into account. And in order to take these facts into account, we must be learned about what was happening in the world, how things are, because otherwise our steel industry, which is today on a growth pattern, will have to have a very different approach. Otherwise, we are going to see this growth peter out. We talk about steel companies while others are performing well. It's a very, what I'd say, a wrong comparison, what is well and what is not. Now, there are operational inefficiencies which can be tackled. But what is the main cause of the failures which are taking place today? Is highly leveraged operations. You cannot have a situation where for every ton of steel, the financial cost is going to be in the range of 5,000 to 6,000 rupees. Whereas your competition, international competition, having zero, as was also mentioned by the Joint Secretary. We have to find a solution to this. It's not that it is not possible. Economists, industrialists, entrepreneurs must get together in what are we supposed, because once the safeguard duties go, what then? We are back to square one. Now, these are issues which have to be tackled. We might like to wish them away. We might like to, look at that since we have had a 6% growth in the steel in India, that all is hunky-dory. It certainly is not. We need a much more elaborate, detailed, informed decision in how to make the steel industry move from its 85 million tons today to 200 at least by 2015. Why steel? Because no country can have sustainable growth. We want growth of 9%, 8%, you must have a steel industry. Without it, so there was one of the bureaucrats, quite a well-learned bureaucrat, who told me, there is so much of surplus capacity of steel in the world. Why do we have to build a steel plant? We'll live on imports. I mean, there is nothing. Then, we had to tell him that today, look at all the developed countries. Yes, they import, but they import only for the purpose of maintaining what you would call a pressure on the domestic producers to maintain a pricing model, because they don't want them to go berserk by not having anything to import. Who is the biggest importer in the world today? The biggest importer in the world today of steel is USA. They produce 100 and they import another 30. And this has been their pattern over the last 20 years. That 30 might become 25 or it might go to 35, but that's the pattern. And anybody saying that we'll work on imports because there is spare capacity and no investments would be required is making a very serious mistake. So what is the policy? What are the regulatory initiatives which we must have? We also must have, I'm sure Sushim will be talking about it, on promoting steel usage. That's also another factor. Because with our per ton, per capita consumption, it's better not to talk about it. 50 kgs against 500 kgs in other countries. I mean, these are areas also which must be given due importance. How do we increase that? I'm sure Sushim in this thing will bring out some of these issues. And raw materials, we must have a right policy. It looks like it is a policy which is now being developed. And infrastructure development will have to be tackled not only by the steel plants, it has to be tackled as a part of the country's growth. Because otherwise, if a steel plant has to do all this, it adds to the costs and it doesn't give any additional benefit in terms of what internationally people are doing. I conclude now with this thing that it's all good to have these forums in order to, but we have to be serious about it. There's no point in wishing things under the carpet and thinking they will resolve itself. The burden is on us. The burden is not on anybody else. And to that extent, if we have to fulfill our commitments, our passion for the steel industry, we must do a proper critical analysis of what are the issues and try to find solutions for them. And I would like to state even more that it's not only a government issue, it is a combined issue which we must resolve. And I do not see safeguards as the only solution. There are many other issues which we must tackle, and I'm sure in this brief time which we have had, I've been able to give you at least my views on where I see the issues. I don't know the solutions, but at least identification of the issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mola Mukherjee. I think your plain speaking has made the day for us. What I understand, you see, we tend to take too much pride in saying we are the third largest producer of steel. We keep up to that. Like I used to always tell in my life, in younger days, I have never stood second in my life. Till one person asked me, have you ever stood first? I said, no. The first line sentence is okay. So when we say we are the third largest producer, we never say what is our per capita consumption. We are probably not even in the first 100 countries. So thank you, Mr. Mola Mukherjee. I will now invite Mr. Sushim Manage to speak on the innovative applications of this steel.